Zorian, you here yet?
Hey, hey, yes, sir.
How are
What's
you,
up,
How are
Zorian?
sir?
you? Doing great. I can't complain. What's going on?
We
What's
are
up,
just
man?
we are rolling. Um,
Hey, Scott.
What's going on, bud?
Doing well. I can't complain, guys. I'm sorry about the 10, 15-minute late thing. I really apologize. There's too much going on, and you're like, oh my God, how do I, you know, make sure I'm not late to everything?
It's
oh,
fine.
no worries.
Totally.
So we've already got the recording going. This is how we roll because sometimes it's even funnier when we start, beforehand. Um, Goal of the conversation, right? There is no goal. There is no particular topic. We want to just dig in and ask a bunch of sales stuff. Obviously, if there's something you want to talk about, let us know. Uh, if there's something you're super passionate about in terms of what's going on in the sales world, we want to go there. Um, if there's something you don't want to talk about, that's okay. Just say, let's skip that for today, which we're happy to do. And that's kind of it. And then just sort of usually have a little bit of a heads up at the end. We'll ask you, Zorian, how can we help you? What's something we can do for you? So if you've got a cause you want to mention, or if you've got a business advice question you want to ask, we'll be glad to give you an answer. Can't promise it'll be an excellent answer, but we'll see where it goes.
Perfect. I
Hey,
love it. So is this a video cast?
Oh yeah,
Or so you put it online and let everybody just watch. I love it. That's
yes,
awesome.
because we're so handsome, the three of us, and
Well,
it drives downloads and viewership, Zorian.
Well, if you put me on, I'm sure people will unsubscribe. Hollywood looks have never been my thing, unfortunately, but
that's all
it's all
right.
right. I've
I got
gotten
the
by.
same. I'm afflicted with the same pain. So
Hey, just just so you guys know, I have to leave right at 5 o'clock Central
that
on the
worked.
on the button. You guys feel free to keep going, but I have to jump.
That's all right. So let's jump into it. And so for those everybody who's listening, welcome to another edition of the Serpent Sales Podcast. Super excited, um, as always. Super excited. We want to give a shout out quick to our sponsor, Lead 411, with the most excellent intent data, direct dial phone numbers. And if you haven't gone back and listened to it, I can't even remember which episode, but Tom Blue over at Lead 411 went and got like super cool movie thriller guy to record an ad for it because we keep butchering it. So every now and then we'll play it. So you got to go find it. It's a nice little Easter egg in our world. But I want to talk today. We are here, super excited to talk to Chief Revenue Officer Zorian Rotenberg, and he is currently the CRO at Infotelligent. He's been there about 7 months. I think one of the reasons, and we're certainly excited to talk to him, but he also was at Insight Squared for almost 8 years, right, as a head of sales and marketing. So I think that's the goal, is that I need to get that marketing added to my title because I won't get fired after 18 months, which is the norm, right?
Actually,
So
I was at Inside Squared for a couple of years, and then after I left, Fred was too kind and asked me to stay as on the board of advisors.
yeah.
So a lot of that tail end was just being a friend of the firm, but probably more so than that, a huge fan. I just have a ton of passion for what they do, which is sales analytics and sales business intelligence.
So,
And
so so talk about that. When did you start to geek out on sales data?
that's a really great question. So I would say that after business school, I decided to go to sell and learn sales at IBM, which is kind of weird because where I went to business school, majority of my classmates went to venture capital, private equity, hedge funds, Wall Street. And there were just a couple of us who decided to go do sales. But the reason for that was that I met this gentleman, Dan Smith, who was CEO of Sycamore Networks. He went to my business school to get his MBA. He went undergrad to Lehigh University, where I went. So we had a connection. And I said, what should I do? And he said, go into sales. He said, you either sell something or you make something. And in high tech, everything else is sort of not as important. And he said, if you go into sales, one day you'll be CEO because that's the best kind of path to become a CEO of a successful company in tech. So I went into IBM, and one thing I realized is that there's a lot of science that could be applied to sales. And I think the reason for that is because I studied math. I got a minor in applied mathematics when I went for my undergrad. Also had a minor in computer science and a major in finance. Also started my career in investment banking on Wall Street. Was an analyst. So spent a lot of time in Excel, probably 80 to 100
But
hours
were
a week.
you, but were you just a numbers geek as a kid?
I was a numbers geek. I love numbers.
Were you on
So
the math team and all that kind of stuff?
that, yes, and chess team too. You just cracked me. So,
Which is
and
good. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. So, look, to all the parents out there, like, if you aren't getting your kids math skills, like, you're missing the boat, right? Like, math hasn't changed in ever. Like, one plus
well,
one is always equal to one. It just keeps
if you
getting better.
if you're using me as a role model, you're gonna get a lot of parents not wanting to put their kids to math. So,
That's the next question. We're
yeah,
gonna ask what that meant.
but the point is that when I started doing sales, I'm like, wow, a lot of this stuff can be quantified. And then I was very fortunate. So at IBM, I started thinking about that. And then I was hired by this gentleman named Walter Scott, who was CEO of a company called Acronis. And I worked for him for about 3 years. And he's an incredible individual, my role model. He actually was born in a trailer park in Maine, which he now owns. He was a very successful sales professional who went up the ranks and then ultimately ran Acronis, made a lot of money for the investors. And everything I learned about sales management and running sales was primarily from him. And it was always in Excel. This is a guy who would start work at 4:30 in the morning. He was formerly in the military. He's an incredible person, worked extremely hard. And we would always talk in Excel terms. And we would measure sales activity, like every granular, like, effective phone calls, conversions to demos, conversions from demos to opportunities,
How do you
everything.
how do you quantify an effective phone call?
That's a great question. So back then we did it in a very basic way because we didn't have the technology the way we have it, 10 plus years later today. So there were just like regular phone calls that you'd actually pick up, and you had, headsets. And back then, the first point or leading indicator of an effective phone call is somebody was on the phone for 2 minutes or more, right? When they were reaching out to a prospect. Of course, what was really funny, we would notice information, and this is besides the point, but people calling their grandma or the credit card company just to put up the numbers, which was very funny. And we had
I
to,
remember those days.
I remember.
Grandma's credit card.
So, and you had to kind of balance how to coach people and make sure that they understand that they really got to make the real effective ones. But then we would measure effectiveness from a point of view of how many conversions became meetings and how many of these meetings ultimately turn into opportunities. So the effectiveness of any call ultimately is the downstream conversion to an opportunity, and an opportunity, because we were so quantitative there, and because Walter was so quantitative, he and I were like, we were kind of like a perfect fit, geeking out on numbers, and we would define criteria for an opportunity very very kind of formally, and have a very structured method. What makes an opportunity? There has to be a definitive like need. There has to be an interest in continuing to work with us. There has to be a fit. Nobody could come to you and say, hey, this feels like an opportunity. The word feels didn't exist there. It was always very quantified, very measurable, and you had to always like think on your feet. And so that's kind of like how we measured it.
So
How many of your calls translated to opportunities?
do you think sales is more of a science than an art then?
So I knew that you would ask this because I knew you and Scott,
Because he always asks this question.
I know both of you have your own feelings about quantification and
Yeah,
key
so
performance
don't play the middle. You got to pick a side. Pick a side.
that's impossible because I'm strictly in the middle. My side is the middle. So look, I mean, it's one of those things where you can't have only one or the other, right? Like it really is. And what makes sales, and I would say not even sales, actually, I would say sales management, right? I think that sales management is definitely has definitely a large component of being scientific, no question about it. Selling itself, probably you could say there's more of the EQ relationship um, factor, right? And I think both are equally important, right? It's just like you can't be really good at relationships and qualifying and discovery and follow-ups, but not understand your numbers and how many dials you have to make for every meeting, how many meetings you need to convert to an effective opportunity, how many ops you need, for close one deal. You can't just do one but not understand the other. Like in today's day and age, everything has to be measurable, right? Like look at any basic platform, Outreach, SalesLoft, and others, right? Even though they're meant for reaching out and outbounding, the key component of each one of those applications is the ability to have the dashboards, measure everything, understand, the numbers that your SDRs are putting up, right? So it's really both. I picked the middle side, and that's the side I pick.
Changing topics for a second here. I want to know from you, what are most VPs of sales getting wrong right now when they go in and take over an opportunity? What is the most common mistakes that you see people making?
When you mean like join a company
Yeah.
as an opportunity, or take
Yeah. So
opportunities in the pipeline?
let's I'll pick on Richard here. So let's say Richard goes and gets a job as a VP of sales, right? It's his first VP of sales job. Theoretically, for him, it would be his first one in a decade plus, I think. Right. So like, what are the things this new VP of sales right now is going to shank on? How can we help those new VPs of sales not make some of these mistakes? What are they getting wrong?
That's a really good question. You guys are good, and I wish you just emailed them so I could give it more thought. But if the goal is to kind of be kind of
It's like a job. We're
spontaneous,
actually interviewing you.
this
So it doesn't have to
okay?
be
Well,
like
I just want to make sure I get this job at the end. I am going to try to be a closer and ask for the job, right? For the offer letter, right? Work for you guys. So look, I think there's a couple of things that come to mind, because obviously being part of a network, Revenue Collective, some of the others, Richard, you and I are obviously members of MSP, Modern Sales Pros, right? Like you know a lot of people, you see them joining companies, things they struggle with, they're asking about, to kind of bounce ideas on. I think there are probably several things. One is the first 100 days, right? And I don't say the first 90 days. It's more like the presidential first 100 days has a better ring to it. But really not to change too many things all at once, right? I think it's key to, when you join the company, that fine balance of knowing what has been done before you came there and making sure that you really understand the context and not, um, not, throw the prior sales leader under the bus, but really understand why things were done the way they were, right? Don't jump to conclusions too quickly, right? Respect the current system and context and environment. Second of all, it's very important to ask a lot of questions. Just meet the team, get to know each other, put people at ease. I think a lot of VPs of sales come in and they start changing things quickly. The team gets very nervous, right? You'll ask people and they'll think that the new VP wants to fire some of the folks, right? And they get nervous. You don't want that. You want people to have confidence in you, and that, you want them executing, right? Not worried. And I would say it's, there's probably like another thing to it, is that really, you're coming in, you're going to be very busy trying to figure out, what's really happening, how things are working. But before you start drafting up a new strategy, um, coming up with what you're going to do, kind of creating your own fingerprint on the organization, probably like just pick up, maybe not the phone, but outreach or sales loft or whatnot, and make some dials to existing customers and just check in on how they're doing, find out why they were buying, find out what they're unhappy about, right? And I think without that stage of actually customer conversations, when you're a VP and you're trying to make changes after your first 3 months, 100 days, whatnot, without actually having a conversation with customers, not just the internal team, you got a big gap, right? And you're not sort of adhering to that philosophy of sell the way your customers want to buy. You got to understand how customers prefer to buy, why they bought from you, what they're unhappy about. Then you have the full picture, and then that 100 days you can wrap it up, and now you can come up with a plan.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Number one, so many VPs will not pick up the phone and call existing customers.
Yep.
That is, of all the things you said, that's to me probably the one that gets overlooked the most.
Well, remember Bill Gates had this great phrase. He said, your most unhappy customers are your best source of learning.
Yeah.
So pick up the phone, call your happy customers, but also unhappy ones. And I think that's going to be your best source of learning before you're ready to implement your new strategy as a new VP.
Then the other thing that I was going in this train of thought, like, you have been a head of sales, VP of sales, CRO, whatever you want to call it. All the titles are interchangeable at this point to me.
Actually, we should talk about that exactly, because
we are. That's my next question.
I have a strong opinion on CRO versus.
This is my next question, Zorian. Stop cutting me off.
I'm sorry.
My first question before that is, what advice do you have for CEOs and how to have a better relationship with their CROs, VPs of sales, heads of sales? So
wow, that's a damn great question.
Yeah,
that literally is, and I attest to the fact that we actually have not talked before this call where you told me what questions you'll ask. That's a really smart question, and the reason I actually say that is not trying to pander. I'm just literally. I think there's the job of running your sales or the entire revenue lifecycle as a CROs. It's extremely complex job, and not just complicated, but complex. There are many sort of unknowns and complicated nuances where it's like the balloon you push on one side and there's more on the other side. It's kind of like there are very many interconnected complexities. And I think if the CEO doesn't understand sales and doesn't understand the CROs or the EVPs of sales job, it really overcomplicates things even further. So to give you an example, and I just spoke about it earlier today, I was doing a webinar on scaling sales. Like, one thing that I see very often, and it's just one of many, many examples, is that the CEO says, let's go set some goals. Problem number one, they have never put together a bottoms up or a sales operating production model where you can look at all the assumptions in Excel. Now I'm coming back to my quantitative sort of geeky mode, if you will, but you really have to put all the assumptions in Excel to discuss them. So a lot of times they don't do that. They just say, we're going to hit this number, let's go. Well, how do you know you can hit this number? How do you know, like, do you have enough headcount? Do you have enough resources? Have you had a thoughtful discussion about, where your pipeline is going to come from? Is it outbound or inbound? And if it's inbound, where is marketing working effectively? What is the lead generation strategy here? There are so many things, right? There's this misalignment. So one thing is they don't put their numbers in Excel and get together and discuss it. The other thing, even if they do, the thing that I was talking about today specifically is when you're trying to build out a sales development, like a prospecting production model, very simple model, again, going back to Excel, how many dials you're going to make? Was the conversion from your dials to connects? Was the conversion from connects to actual meetings? Was the conversion from those meetings to opportunities? Or emails? If you're going to send 100 emails per day, how many of those actually get you not just a response, but a positive response, meaning a response where someone agrees to take a meeting, a first introductory meeting with your sales AE, account executive. And the problem is that, and this is one that's really funny, if you go on Google and you try to search for benchmarks for outbound cold email, conversions to positive responses, conversions to a meeting, you're actually, believe it or not, and this is absolutely crazy to think this, but you're not going to find real data or correct data. And I know it's a provocatively unusual statement because you would think there are so many companies that, like SalesLoft and Outreach that could put out such benchmarks, but it's not out there. And the CEO will go find, there's an article on a famous blog, which I don't want to mention by name because I don't want to offend anyone, but there's someone who posts that here's how I got my outbound cold response rate from 1% to 14%. So basically, for 100 emails, instead of getting one response, cold outbound, he claims to get 14. Now, this is complete baloney. Like this, it's impossible. Like, we know what the laws of physics are. If you throw an apple, it's going to fall down to earth. It's not going to go back up in the air. But when you say you can get 14% outbound response rate, I will prove to you, you're going against the laws of physics. This doesn't happen. It's impossible. And basically, and I showed this in Excel, that this is like, it would equate roughly to about 300 cold outbound generated meetings per month per person. I've never seen that. It's like getting 14 meetings.
It's because it doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. It's bullshit. So,
but then, unfortunately, you're going to have like a lot of early stage CEOs and founders who maybe see this particular article.
Bingo.
And now they hold their head of sales.
Bingo.
Fire. Right?
Are you reading my mind? I mean, like, how is it? You knew exactly where I was going.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So my question
this is the problem, is that they will show the stat to their CEO, CRO, and VP of sales, and they'll say, why don't we have 14%? Why do we only have 0.5% conversion from cold emails? Because that's the reality of the world.
I wonder if it's written in people get happy years, and it means I'm going to increase mine by 14%. So if I'm at getting 1, I'm getting 1.14.
No,
right?
The guy said literally
And so,
1,400% increase. By the way, his math is wrong. When you go from 1% to 14%, that's actually 14x, but mathematically 1,300%. But not to be a pedantic mathematical geek, I'm going to say this. When I looked at the gentleman's LinkedIn bio, he's never been in sales. He's a content marketer. And this is the problem.
That's even better.
That's even better. This is the problem.
For the record, by the way, I have no idea who you're talking about or what the blog is. I actually don't want to know.
You don't want to know because it will offend too many people.
It's just so rich to me that it was written by.
I want to have him on the podcast. I think we should go
No,
get him
don't.
on the podcast.
But look, and I shouldn't have mentioned 1,400% because you can now search for it and it'll probably pop up first. But look, the main point is not to throw anyone under the bus. The main point, your question was the advice for CEOs. It's like, listen, you hired a senior sales executive, whether it's CRO or VP of sales, and we, by the way, should talk about the titles and the roles, more importantly than just titles. But
next question, Zorian.
Let's go there. But let me just say this: is like, trust them. Just like if you hired them, if you hired correctly, they must be intelligent and successful. Please just step back and listen to them. Don't look for these articles that are completely wrong. And by the way, on that note, I do want to close out. I spoke to Max Altschuler at Outreach. He's fantastic. We had a couple of conversations, and he said they're doing a benchmark on this, and they will provide this data, which I think it will be extremely valuable because it's literally pretty much impossible to find. And it looks so low, like 0.5% or lower conversions on cold outbound, that a lot of CEOs, just to wrap up that answer, long-winded, but definitely very, very profound and important point, is that please believe me, you should not be trusting that information. Trust your sales executive. Otherwise, why did you even hire them? You got to trust them.
Okay, let's move to the question.
Yeah, the next question. So Zorian, let's go back to this, right? Because we're going through this right now of the CRO, revenue ops, sales ops, different titles, different roles. Um, I'm still trying to figure out my opinion on it. I'll be honest with you. Like I don't, I don't have to live in that world, right? Like nobody's coming to me and saying, "Hey, Richard, what's a CRO job description?"
Yeah,
I don't know, go Google and come up with one, right? But I am curious. You're in this world, you're in this game, you talk these things every day. So what are you seeing or hearing, or what advice do you have around this title versus role versus responsibility, accountability?
great. So this is something. It's actually I started writing a post about the CRO role. So I think if you just look at the market, I think what I've noticed is that there is this unnecessary title inflation where you're really a VP of sales, or maybe you're running sales and customer success, post sales and, upsells, cross sells, and you're given a CRO title. But I thought about this long and hard for many years. And I think ultimately there's a reason for a chief revenue officer role. What this role really, really is and is supposed to be, in my opinion, is basically the keyword is revenue. You own the entire revenue, which is everything that drives revenue, including lead generation, that should be under you. And you should have a vice president of marketing under you who knows marketing and lead gen. And specifically the kind of marketing that drives sales, not necessarily brand awareness. That's maybe a little bit outside of that. But the entire top to bottom funnel with customer success, renewals, anything that has to do with revenue. And my opinion is I'd like to bring my own version of the definition, because having started my career in investment banking on Wall Street, I'd like to think of a CRO role as sort of like a hedge fund portfolio manager. So what a hedge fund portfolio manager does, it's a very high-paying job, and it's a very, very complex job. Everything is basically about capital allocation decision, where to allocate resources and get return on investment. And it's really having a very broad and deep at the same time understanding of every piece that impacts your revenue.
You
From
have all these resources. Your job is to know how to deploy them and put them in an optimal position to maximize the return.
Yes, and what that means sort of under the hood, if you drill in, right, is deep analysis. Hedge fund portfolio managers can analyze a stock from every angle you can imagine, because they went through that job before. They're analysts who became more senior, right? So you have to understand strategy, planning. You have to understand the actual selling, customer, how the customer is buying. You have to understand how to build an effective and do the process engineering of the sales process, build an effective, optimal sales process, which is also not a simple thing to do, right? You have to make sure there's execution. You have to measure it. You have to hire effectively. By the way, I would say that hiring great people and talent is the most important thing, right? So you have to understand how to hire effectively. And by the way, that's a whole different conversation we can have about how many mistakes are done in hiring correctly. But long story short, it's a very complex job. So I think a CRO, in a way, is someone like that in managing the company's full funnel, full life cycle of revenue, and understanding from recruiting to strategy to planning to analysis to selling, tactical coaching, strategic coaching, upsells, cross sells, managing customers, managing people. It's you're the head portfolio manager of your revenue. And that's kind of, and by the way, and on top of that, probably more so in sales management as a CRO than even portfolio management, you actually have to have really good leadership skills, which is also, I think, sort of hard to learn and come by. And that's a whole different conversation as well, right? I mean, it's one thing to be a great salesperson and manage sales well, but it's a whole different thing to be an effective leader, which is kind of hard.
For those people who are a VP of sales right now, or a senior VP of sales right now, what is your best piece of advice to them to prep them for being a CRO?
Yeah, I think it's, being a VP of sales is a big part of it, because ultimately CRO, more than lead generation or anything else, you really have to understand how to run sales and deliver the return on investment, right? Do the quota attainment for your entire sales team every, month, every quarter, every year. So you're a VP of sales, you already got it, right? You're already successful. You are where you need to be. But I encourage, to your question, I encourage VPs of sales to think more deeply beyond just helping reps to close deals and tactical sales coaching and film reviews and training and development and recruiting. Step back and think broadly. To become a CRO, how do you figure out a way to drive revenue and maybe scale it even faster? Like extend your thinking beyond just managing your sales team, but what are all the different drivers and knobs and levers above and beyond your sales team that you can strategize on and manage and execute on that will help you drive your revenue? If that makes sense, right? Just not just your sales team, but what are all the other different things that will affect it? And that's basically the capital allocation.
What's the best place for them to learn some of this stuff, right? Like, I don't know if you've been in this particular situation, but I bet, and I promise you, there are VPs of sales out there who are like siloed off, like, hey, Zorian, focus on your deals. Stop asking conversations about demand gen and trying to learn about marketing. Hey, Zorian, stop talking to our account management team and getting involved in post-sale revenue and, all that churn numbers and all this kind of stuff. Like, so where are some of these people supposed to go to develop the skills to be a CRO? Is it just networking? Is it resources like Revenue Collective and MSP and, coaches and that kind of thing? Or is there a better strategy there somehow that we haven't touched on?
Wow, another great question. You guys are good. I mean that genuinely. That's a really thoughtful question. Let me think about that. I think, that's an interesting one because I think you're right.
Where did you go? How did you go from sales to marketing? Like, how did you? Maybe it comes way before you become the VP of sales, right? Maybe we're not doing enough discovery earlier on in our career.
That might be true. I can tell you right now, like when I'm a sales manager in 2005 or whatever, nobody's saying to me, oh, you might want to learn some marketing skills, Scott, in case you want to be a CRO one day. That conversation sure shit never happened.
No, this is a really good question. It's a really good question. So here's what I would say, and I'm going to tell you. So the way I ended up running both sales and marketing was a bit of a coincidence. I was at a company called Veeam, which is one of the probably most successful companies that went from $0 startup. Although I joined at around like 20 million or so, but they went from like 0 to $1 billion in sales in the same, like in 14 years. They started in the same year as HubSpot, and we're still private, and they have more revenue than HubSpot today. And HubSpot is actually, I'm invested in HubSpot stock since earlier this year. Hugely successful stock this year. I'm a huge fan of that company, but Veeam was actually growing faster than HubSpot. And I'm a huge fan of HubSpot, but that's the one thing I'll say is that at Veeam, I was thrown into an opportunity where I was given a chance to grow faster, or was asked to figure out how to grow even faster than what was the goal that year. So instead of like that one year, like 80 million, or like a year later, like we want to hit 80 million, but Zorian, go think about how should we hit 100 million. So part of that was kind of building out a brand new demand gen team to drive sales even faster, take the free app. We had a freemium app, and take those leads and create a brand new sequence and set of processes that will convert them to opportunities faster. And a lot of that created our ability to hit over 100 million. So it was kind of by coincidence an experimental thing. But Scott, the question you asked was how would others do it without sort of this kind of coincidence? Hey, sales VP, go, grab marketing or demand gen rather as well. I think I would say the following is, and I'll probably answer it because I'm watching The Last Dance, Michael Jordan, Chicago Bulls. What an amazing series. And if you look at these like high performing athletes, people of any kind, right? What do they typically do that not everyone does. They work harder and longer and above and beyond. Michael Jordan, the hard work ethic, before everyone else wakes up, he's practicing. When everyone else goes home, remember that part if you watched it. He told his trainer, Tim Grover, by the way, who has a great book out, you should pick it up. But anyway, he said to him, Tim said, listen, the season's over. When do you want to meet up? Because I got to go back, fly back to work. He's like, what do you mean, tomorrow morning? Like the season just ended. Like everybody else is back to their family on vacation. So long story short, if you want to learn how to kind of have more management of the revenue funnel instead of only sales, when the day ends and when you finished your job and when you're ready to go home, go talk to some of the best demand generation, lead generation people, VPs or CMOs out there. Join Revenue Collective or MSP and hook up with the smartest people there and ask them, what strategies are working for them. It's a learning process. Always be learning, right? Always be improving. You ever read about the Toyota production system in Japan? They had this concept of Kaizen, continuous improvement, right? Like, and that's the philosophy you got to have. You're continuously growing, improving, learning. Pick up books and learn from them. Meet smart people, learn from them. And I think if you're not lucky like me, where something was thrown at you by total coincidence, there are so many opportunities to learn. They're right out there in front of you. You just got to grab them.
What do you wish you'd gone back and done earlier in your career? I mean, you've got the math genius in you. You've
Far
got
from genius. Far from genius.
compared to the rest of us in sales, you
Oh,
are.
come on.
I'm still learning pivot tables, dude. Like I'm still on pivot tables. So
I love pivot tables. They're the best.
No, I don't know how to do pivot table. That's what my sales ops people are for. Pivot tables.
So that I think that's what would you be like? Gosh, I wish I'd gone back and I had learned. And maybe you did. Maybe it is that marketing piece. But is there something else you wish you'd learned earlier in your sales, or even in your life career?
Darn, you guys have some amazing questions. I mean, literally, like I don't know if you've studied how to be like TV news anchors, journalists, hosts, whatnot.
We've gone to.
You are literally. I feel bad saying this because it sounds like I'm being disingenuous and just trying to flatter you, but I genuinely really mean that. These are great questions.
Thank you.
What would I go back and do, like learn differently or do differently? I think, look, I mean, there's this concept, and it was on LinkedIn even recently, that as you mature, right, you look back at your career or life and you realize how many things you kind of end up wasting your time on, and how many things there were just kind of like a waste that you could have just like refocused on other things that are so much more important. And I think that, and also the context of what we're sort of going through right now, this unfortunate health crisis and the impact on the economy. And one of the things that I started realizing a couple of weeks and maybe a month into this sheltered home during COVID is what I really miss is a lot of people that I met throughout my life and my career. And because you're constantly working, you're constantly busy. And over the years, I lost touch with so many people. And I started reaching out for no other reason, because I just genuinely wanted to kind of reconnect and see that people are okay. Like I was just like so scared of what's happening out there, that, so many people are getting affected and infected with this virus. And God knows there's some people that I really like that are not maybe doing well. I just really just wanted to reach out and kind of have that human connection while sitting at home. And going back to your question, I wish I did that all along. Is that, the past like decade or two, they went by so quickly, just kind of like in an instant, right? And I wish I stayed in touch with more people, not because I need anyone for anything, but just because there's just so many people I really liked and enjoyed working with and meeting. And I did that with a lot of folks and reconnected with some of my old managers And that was just great. And I just wish I did that
Do you
more
ever
consistently.
do you ever just sit? I do this. I'm projecting, but like, do you ever just sit and daydream and think, if I could just take like the 100 best people I've ever worked with, like all my friends and colleagues, and maybe family member here and there, like, and just that be my company, like that's like a dream kind of situation. That's what I'm picturing in my head right now when you're reminiscing and thinking about people that you've stayed in contact with.
That'd be
And
pretty cool. No, I never thought of that. But,
oh my, I think about
but
this all the time. I'm like, can't I just get like my 100 most favorite people on the planet and
I've
just
done
like
that. I've actually
do
put them in
everything?
role. I've
that
actually
would be
said,
so amazing.
yeah, I'm like, Scott's going to be my CEO. Another buddy's going to be my CRO. I'm
I
just going
was
to be
going to
like,
say,
I'm just going to be like chairman of the board. I'm just going to fund it.
you know,
Right.
I would say the opposite. If I were to pick the smartest and best people that I've ever worked with and put them in the same company, I would end up being the most junior person, just a janitor cleaning up because everyone else is, they're
I
just
only
so good.
ask this. I got to ask this question for Scott's mom because she listens to every episode. Did it bother
Is
you
that right?
you
Is
said,
that true or are you joking?
No,
yes,
it's
it does.
100% true.
Is that
So did it bother you that Scott said maybe a family member or two, and are you now curious as to which family member Scott's alluding?
she knows it might not be her.
Yeah,
Actually, that's not fair. That's not fair. You know what my mom would be amazing at? She would be an amazing executive assistant.
she would be. I've seen her do it for
Be
you.
amazing
So,
at. She's
but
gonna
anyway, Zorian,
ask for a job now.
we have got to, and by the way, we mean that in a very sincere way. Don't think that we're punning. She does a lot of like nitty gritty stuff, and she doesn't mind doing it.
does she like edit your podcast and
No. Let's not get too
and
carried away.
Photoshop Scott a little bit just to make sure it's all perfect?
Dorian, let's not get too carried away here with her computer skills, okay? Anyway, hey, I have to get going. Unfortunately, I would love to keep talking with you and trying to dig some questions out of my brain. Appreciate all the kind words about the good questions. For the record, I know you know this, but like we prepare 0 questions. Okay, I have no idea what I was going to ask you, and neither does Richard until we're in the moment, you know, with the show. So there's something about
You guys are talent. You guys are natural.
There's something about you and you know what your background is and how you answer things that help us arrive at these questions.
Interesting.
So you know we thank you for being an interesting and special guest of the show.
You're too kind.
What can we do to help you?
I appreciate it. You know, I haven't thought of anything necessarily, but I would say that if I may ask, if people are interested in, you know, we at Infotelligent, do you mind if I talk about our company briefly?
Please do.
I don't want to be overly self-promotional
You burned it.
and not be discourteous in any sense, but we actually do sell. We kind of call ourselves, salespeople selling sales tools to salespeople, and Infotelligent is like, like Zoom Info, which went public obviously a couple months ago. We are a bit different. If anybody's looking for a product like that, or if anybody's interested, please check us out. Infotelligent.com, great product. And I would say I don't really think I'm very fortunate. I don't feel like I want to ask anyone for help, but I do enjoy helping others. So if as my old boss said, he did well, and he always said like he likes to send an elevator down, sort of in a sense of helping. So if anyone thinks I can be helpful in any way, your listeners or anybody wants to talk about, how to think about becoming a CRO, I don't think there's anything, any secrets about it. I'm happy to help people. And if anybody is struggling, looking for work, we're also hiring people. So please, by all means, if I can be helpful, I'm happy to.
Let's plug that real quick, Zorian. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you? Is it LinkedIn?
I think LinkedIn is very easy. I'm probably one of the few Zorians out there, so you can easily find me. You can, I think go for LinkedIn. You can.
Okay. And then what roles are you hiring for, and do they have to be based, in the Boston area, or is it virtual at this point? Let's plug that real quick.
So we're actually, interestingly enough, we're we're happy to have great people remotely. We like talent. We don't care about where people live and work from. SDRs, AEs, we're growing, fortunately. And I'm very lucky sort of to be part of something, high quality. So, yeah, AEs, SDRs, reach out and I'll be happy to chat.
Yeah. Awesome.
How can I be helpful to you guys? Is there anything I can do for you? I
No,
gotta ask that in
dude,
return.
this
Well,
was
that's
it. No,
that's
this
a
was
whole
it.
nother hour-long show, Zorian, where I tell you all the needs that I have. Okay, we'll do that. We'll do that later on.
Well, I just want to say you guys are great. Really genuinely mean it. Great questions. Love talking about
Thank
the
you.
kinds of things we're talking about here, from quantifying sales to the provocative questions of like, is it science? Is it not? What is a CRO role? All the things I actually really enjoy talking about. So really want to say I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about things I enjoy and to join you guys. You guys are great.
Great. Thank
Awesome,
you
man.
very much, Zorian. We really appreciate it. We obviously got to give a shout out to our sponsor, Lead 411. We really appreciate what they're doing to support us. Zorian, good luck over at Infotelligent. We appreciate everything you've got going on. And we will talk to everybody again
Thank you so
soon.
much. See you guys.